Hi and welcome back to the World Othello Championships 2019. We have two of the players here who are at the top of the leaderboard, Takahashi and Song. Japan versus China. And Song spent unusually about 15 seconds on his first move. And that's a really good example of the fact that these players do know what they're going to play, but they stop and they think, and they don't play it mindlessly, even the moves that they know. So Song was thinking to himself, do I play, like, it will be one of two moves at move 2. It will be either perpendicular or diagonal, and again, who you are playing comes into that consideration. Song normally plays diagonal, but if he wanted to throw Takahashi and thought that Takahashi had prepared against his openings, then he may do some other opening that he knows well, just to throw things into the mix, mix things up a bit, and not be predictable. Because you can have very good openings, but if you're predictable, then people can prepare specifically against you. Takahashi knew exactly what he wanted to play, and he's used 6 seconds so far, and just played. And this is a position that both of them will know well. It's called it's an opening called the Heath Bat. The Heath being the G5 move, and the Bat being the E3 move. Not played, well, I haven't seen it played too much recently. It used to be played a lot more, but Takahashi obviously is thought about his openings. So Yan Song has already used 4 minutes, well, three minutes of his time in the opening phase. Something that I'm pretty sure he already knows. Takahashi has just stopped to think for the first time. Which would suggest that he wasn't expecting D6 from Song. Again, it doesn't mean that he doesn't know the position, it just means he wasn't expecting it in this game. And so he's going to stop and have a little think. As we've seen with Song's other games, he's not afraid to take a block of pieces on one side of the board and then play out other positions at the other side of the board in such a way that he does what he needs to do to get people to play for a block. And he's got this block in the bottom left here, but he's also got the G3 disc, which is going to get in his way a bit. It makes it difficult for white to find decent moves, but it's black's move, so it's not. So actually looking at the position then, and starting to think about it now that if the players are thinking, then we should be thinking too. It's black's move. What are his options? H3 is one option because the way in which the black and the white discs meet in the middle with E4 and F5 doesn't allow any white moves. Okay, Takahashi has chosen C4. Okay. So his reason for playing that is he's trying to keep his disc central, and it appears that he'll be able to play c5 as well, taking a block of discs but in the middle of the board and in the middle of the played pieces, leaving g3 to get in the way of any white moves. What is white going to do in response to this? c3 is an option. I'll run through the possible moves. No, I won't, because white has just played to c3. Fortunately, it was the only option that I'd said at this point. I expect c5 or c6 now, because the whole point of c4 was to be playing central discs and taking discs in the centre and leaving white outliers on the edge of the position. And yep, c5 has indeed been played. So, with the other games that I've watched Yan-SONG play in this tournament and previously, this is not a very natural position for him, where he has some pieces on the edge and outliers on the other side of the board. He's a talent, so it's not that he can't deal with it, but it's not a very natural position for him. So, in this position, as a player, if you're black, you're looking at the right-hand side and you're saying, how can I play out this edge to my benefit? Black has played c4 and c5 to get central discs, not leaving white too many options about how to play through. White will want to play f2 at some point before the diagonal gets another of his pieces on it. So black is asking the question, how do I play out this right edge? And the two obvious moves are h4 and g6. G6 is perfectly quiet, so is always worth considering, only flips internal discs. The reason that h4 may be better, h5 is another option, but the reason that h4 might be better is because if white plays f2, then black can play e2. But black has chosen the perfectly quiet move of g6. Now, white needs to decide whether he wants to continue playing out the right side or whether he wants to do f2 now. f2 now might be a reasonable option because black doesn't have the natural response to e2, as the g4 disc is white. He wouldn't have access to e2. But there is also the option of h6 for white here. It doesn't flip diagonally, it only flips the one disc. But it does leave the very natural response of h4 for black. And then white would need to play again. So my view here is that f2 will be played. And assuming it is, black would then be thinking about how to continue playing out the right edge or whether to come down to c7. But in terms of the options of playing out the right edge, h3 wouldn't flip diagonally if f2 has been played. So Okay, so Yan-Song has chosen f2, and Takahashi now will be looking at h3 or c7. He's gone for h3 immediately. Quite often, when edges are played out, if h3 or h6 squares is taken first, then the response that white would like to make is h5, leaving one gap so that he doesn't lose a tempo. If black plays in the hole, then white could take the edge. At least have the option of taking the edge. May not choose to do so, could also play h6. So the idea is that in any strategy game, actually, you maximise your options and you minimise your opponent's options. And if you maximise your options, minimise your opponent's options, then you get to control the game. And if you get to control the game and the direction of the game, you can force the outcome in a given direction. And h5 gives white the options of how to play out the right edge, depending on black's response. And he has indeed, Yan-Song has chosen to play h5. It is quite likely now that Takahashi will play h4, and then Song will have to choose whether to take the edge or to play h6 and allow black to take the edge. Okay, and Takahashi has indeed played h4. So now white has a decision to make, and if he hasn't already thought this through clearly, this is a good time to stop and think, because often the first taking of the first edge defines the direction of the game. So he'll be asking himself the question, how does the rest of the board look if I take the edge? And how does the rest of the board look if I play h6 and allow black to take the edge? And he's chosen to take the edge. And black has chosen to give the full edge. So this is a balanced edge. It's symmetrical. It's pointing equally into two corners. It's difficult to sacrifice against because any sacrifice giving white the corner would save the whole edge and give options of building on that corner. So it's difficult to sacrifice against, but the reason that Takahashi did that is so that he got a move there, rather than just allowing Yan-Song to take a further move. And he said, well, I'll play out this pair, me, you, and then it's me to play again, but you've now got a wall at the bottom of the board, and if I can start making you play through my pieces, especially given that you've got that edge, which is going to give you lots of discs to flip. It's going to flip a lot of discs. And so this kind of position, it feels as though black is winning, and black probably is winning, but the solid white edge on the right-hand side is difficult to sacrifice against and could become more solid. So not necessarily immediately, but in terms of thought of concept, D2 and E2 pull out G4 and G5, which leaves the edge, the H column and the G column together. We call it a 6-on-4, and it can complicate the game because it allows some swindles later if black tries to play either of the corners. Then okay, Song has chosen to play E2, perfectly reasonable, pulling out one of those discs that I just said. Black doesn't have immediate access to D3. Black C2 now looks quite natural, just because white doesn't have any moves through the middle and would have to start playing through probably at C6. Yeah, and Takahashi has played it. So I fully expect C6 now as the quietest move possible, but it does give D7 as an immediate natural response, and then white having to play through again. So if Yan Song isn't happy with that, he might do something that's less natural, but the position is looking tricky for him at the moment. So it's an interesting position because white has not got much control, but black doesn't have many choices either because of the white block against the edge. And it's the sort of game where black, because it's white's move in this position, black should be fairly confident that they're controlling the game and that they will be choosing where white plays next and that kind of thing. However, because of the 6 edge and only a couple of black discs in that big white block, which could come out very easily, for example, if D2 is played, then C1 would pull all of them out. It's the kind of position where, if you're not careful, you can feel that you're a long way ahead, but suddenly you just don't have access anywhere. And that's what Yan Song will be thinking about right now. I mean, he's got to keep playing, he's got to play through. But is it possible for him to use the massive white discs over on the right-hand side of the board to create access difficulties in the end game for Takahashi? And he has indeed played C6. So D7 looks like the natural response. Through the middle, flipping only internal discs, keeping up the theme of, yeah, Takahashi has played it, keeping up the theme of asking white to play through on the left-hand side. The move that white would like to play now is D3, so he doesn't have access there, but he can be asking himself the question, how do I play this out so that I actually get that move at the end? An example would be E8. If white played there, he would have access through the middle, and black can take it away again, but white would, yeah, okay, so he's played E8. Black can take away that access again, but white can, by playing D8, but white can then take the edge and get access back and straight through the middle. But Takahashi, without thinking too much on this move specifically, so he's obviously aware of what he wants to do here, has played f8. So Yan-SONG now has an option of playing the d3 move that we said was good previously, but it does make the whole of the d column white, so black d8 immediately afterwards would be very strong and damaging for white. So instead he may play f7 first. If he does play f7 first, black will likely take the edge, leaving taking away access to d3 again, and forcing white to play through even further on the left-hand side. White can't really take this edge too happily because black would have f7 for themselves, or d8. Yeah, okay, so Yan-SONG has played f7 and Takahashi has taken the edge. So what are White's options here? He could give black, or would be thinking, these are things that he could be thinking about and reasons why he may actually dismiss all of them, but he could be thinking about giving black the bottom edge completely, for example c8 followed by b8 and then making a sacrifice at g7. The problem with that is that even if black takes the corner and white takes the wedge, giving him access to a8 and the whole edge, black has some huge moves at the right hand side. Can take a lot of stable discs in the top right. So white may not choose to do that. White could play b8. The idea is that it's just a tempo, and it doesn't really give black much more than he already has. But black would be able to come down to g8 and say, touche, I'll take my spare move and you've still got to play through. So white may not want to play that as well. So in which case he has to think about playing through, and that is what he's done. He's played through to b5. There was probably the option of b3 as well, but he's chosen b5. Got access back to the d3 square, although it does also flip diagonally because of the b5 disc now. But that may not be a bad thing, because black at the moment has the option of playing g8. So if white can take the c4 disc and protect that diagonal, then black loses that option. And as we said before, options are good. It's not going to work because because black can come straight, if white does play d3, black can come straight through to d2 and get access back to everything that he needs. But immediately, anyway, it's black's move right now, and he will be aware that he's got G8 there. He may not play that immediately because he knows that he can get back. So yeah, B4. So although D3 does have the immediate response of D2, white would then be able to play B6 as a really a perfectly quiet move. So I'm not quite sure what white can do here, but as I say, that block of discs on the right-hand side could be used to create a game where black has access difficulties. Okay, so white has chosen D3, black will almost certainly play D2 and does so immediately. And white will probably play B6, black will probably play B3, and then it's white's move. Or E1 is another option, but he has played the B3 move. So this is looking really tricky for white. Has no sacrifices. B8 is always met by G8 if black's happy with what's happening in the top left corner. And any play that white makes in the top left-hand corner has an immediate response. So for example, A4 is met by A3 because white doesn't have anything on the B4 to D2 diagonal. He can't come back through. And the same on the top edge. D1 is met by C1, and again, white doesn't have anything on the D2 to B4 diagonal, the same diagonal, to come through to E1. So deciding that there's no easy way to play out that top corner, Yan-SONG has decided to play down on the bottom edge. The idea being that if black does take that edge, then white can make the sacrifice at G7, as we discussed earlier. But it's not clear whether that's going to work out in his favour, even if he gets to play it, because H8 followed by G8, white H8, black. After, if black takes B8 now and white sacrifices at G7, black can take the H8 corner, white can take the wedge at G8, and then later on take the corner at A8. But black also gets his own edge and into a corner where white hasn't got any play at all. So black has more options for taking stable discs in the top right than white would in the bottom left. So Takahashi may choose not to take this edge, but if he does, it's not. He shouldn't be too scared of the sacrifice in the bottom right. What could he do instead? He could play G7 himself, making an even region in the more. If he's really happy with the block in the top left being played out nicely for him, then G7 means that it forces white to start playing through that block in the top left. But he's chosen to take the edge. Now, we believe that the sacrifice will come, and there it is. And black shouldn't be too afraid of taking this corner and giving away sacrifice, as I said, because he's got a lot of play in the top right, but he might want to choose the order in which he does things. So, for example, E1 first. Right, E1 played. And this should be followed by F1, largely because black doesn't have access to D1. And if it does go black-white in the bottom corner and then black up into H1, there would be an even region. So white would get the last move in the top region. A4 is another option for white here, but what we said previously really hasn't changed much. So A4 can be met with A3. White doesn't have access to A5 and has to find a move and ends up playing F1 anyway. So the question is, does F1 open up anything for black on the left? Because, for example, A6 doesn't flip diagonally, but at the same time, if black is going to allow white into the bottom left corner, then he doesn't really want to block himself off from playing in there himself. So F1 is probably the right move, and I think it's just been played. So it's not yet up on live Othello, but F1 has been played. Now, as I said, that it does open up the option for black to play A6 without flipping diagonally. And we should have a think about whether there's an advantage to doing that. It would probably be met by A4 if it is played. If white wanted to play on that edge. But white also may be looking to take the top edge with D1. This is looking like it's moving in black's favour. Takahashi again has plenty of time on his clock. Song has enough time to be able to play the game properly, unlike Takahashi in the last round. I did actually talk to Takahashi after the last round and asked him what he was worried about, and he showed me on his phone. And it was a real, I can't remember exactly, it was a real thing that he was worried about, but he said he spent far too long thinking about it. He needed to play. But it did make me think that maybe there was a psychological reason why he was more scared than he should be, and that psychological reason may have been playing Takahashi in Takahashi's form this year, and Takahashi's sporadic form this year. He always manages to up his game for the World Championships. But Takahashi is, I believe, ahead of him in the ratings. So Black might also consider taking the G1 edge, taking G1 now, because he can, with confidence, play out the bottom right-hand corner and then take H1 anyway. So he shouldn't be afraid of White finding a decent sacrifice against his top edge, his top ugly edge that's sticking out. If he does take G1, because he can just save it from the other side, from the H1 corner anyway. A4, A5 and A6 are all options also for Black in this situation, each with their own merits and their own pitfalls. A4, for example, flips all the way to the D7 disc, which has its advantages because if the left-hand side is played out, White wouldn't be able to sacrifice at B7, because if you imagine the D7 disc being black, White would flip the whole 7 row white, and that, depending on how the edge is played out, could very likely lead to a swindle in the bottom corner. So that is an advantage of A4, but it does leave a number of potential responses for White to actually play out the left edge in a way where the sacrifice still might be possible. So, for example, A5, A6 would also be a good move. So how about A5 now for Black? It's probably the least appealing of the moves down there. And probably won't actually be considered. I'm not sure what would happen afterwards, but I feel that it gives White too much control and choice. Takes Black's last pieces. A5, as I said, has its advantage. A6 has its advantage in that it doesn't flip in the diagonal because of the F1 move that's just been played. It's quite likely that White would either meet it with A4. If he chooses to play out the left-hand side, A6 will be met with A4. But White also has the option of, White always has the option of just taking D1 and forcing the game, but he would, it might be a case of taking D1 might just be a case of leaving. Okay, so Takahashi has actually taken the top edge, sticking out ugly, lots of potential for sacrifices in the top left, but doesn't really matter because if Takahashi wants to save it, he can come in through the bottom corner, bottom right-hand corner, taking H8, giving the wedge of G8 to White and then coming up to H1, getting access in the process to D1. So after H1, White would very, very naturally just fill in G2, but Black would have access to D1, which he hasn't had previously, and that would leave White to find another move. But by this point he would have the A8 corner, so he could play B7. So probably white's best options here are A4 and D1. What are the advantages or disadvantages of each? Just as it's been throughout the game, A4 can still be met by A3, and white doesn't have the natural response to A5, so that hasn't changed throughout the game. It would then mean, so it would be white A4, black A3, and white would have to take that edge. Or this is looking very tricky for white now. So white A4, black A3, white would have to take the edge. It's an ugly edge, in the same way that black's edge is ugly, but as we've said, black can get in and save it whenever he likes. But it would be at least, it would at least then be black's move. So what are the advantages instead of A4 playing D1? Well, the first move would be forced. Okay, well, maybe we'll get to look at that another time, because Yan-SONG has chosen A3, a move that I hadn't thought about. So I think that taking the corner now, yeah. Takahashi has taken the corner, he'll give the wedge. That's why he didn't mind taking the top edge, because he can go and save it and get access to D1. But right now, he can also play B7. So when white plays A8, he completely cuts himself off from the left-hand side of the board. In slight consolation for white, at least it's an even region, but nevertheless, once the top right corner's played out, white is going to have to play up there anyway. So this is looking not like a huge win, but a very comfortable win. So maybe not huge in terms of discs, but very, very difficult to see how white can actually find anything from here. So looking at H1 now, it's the line which is most easy to read. Okay, Takahashi has gone for the B7 move, as I previously suggested. Is there the possibility of Yan-SONG playing D1? But yeah, this is going to be a black win. Leaving the odd region in the top left for parity. So the bottom left will now go white, black, white, black. Black has the wedge, then white passes, black goes into the top of the board and just plays out black, white, black, white, black. Getting the last move in both the bottom left and the top left, already having a good number of stable discs on the right and in the middle of the board. Will be a comfortable win for black. Probably a5 now. a7, a6, it's all pass. So black getting the last move in that region. Now just working out the best way to pull the most discs in the last 5 moves. Instinct tells me b1, but instinct isn't always right. Takahashi agrees. Comfortable black victory, and Takahashi takes another step towards the semi-finals. I would need to look at the ratings to see how much this has damaged Song's chances, but it was a game where it appeared that Takahashi was ahead and controlling from early on. Needed to play a few things out correctly, but you'd expect him to do that. So anyway, we will leave it there, and we will be back for the next round shortly.